Welcome back to Desk Careers, everybody. I'm so excited, as always, to bring another amazing guest to our Desk Careers Spotlight. Today, we meet Katy Naylor, who is the Head of Clinical Operations and Education at Moorfields Eye Hospital in Dubai. Welcome, Katy.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's so exciting to have you here. We've met a few of your colleagues. We've learned quite a lot about the hospital and the different roles. And I have to say, your title, Head of Clinical Operations and Education, just sounds so, whatever that is, I kind of feel I want to be doing that. What does it mean? Let's kind of break it down for anybody watching. What is the Head of Clinical Operations and Education?
So it quite easily splits into two quite different fields. So you can almost consider me to be sort of dual professionalism almost, because I've trained to be in education. I've also trained to manage. So I'm very lucky working in a smaller hospital that I can do both of those things. So the managerial, the clinical operations side of my role very much is the organization of the clinics, trying to bring down journey times, making sure that the right doctors are working for the right, so we've got a full spectrum of specialties working in the hospital at any one time. So that's very much more of an organizational management part of my role. The education part of my role was something that I've always really been very, very passionate about, which is medical education and it as an ongoing, long-term, lifelong learning part of medicine. So I basically head up all of the education that Moorfields does. So obviously with the very strong help from all of the doctors and the clinical staff here to actually produce that education, but I essentially coordinate everything. So I coordinate with local universities. We do all of the undergraduate teaching, for example, in ophthalmology for Mohammed bin Rashid University of Health Sciences, so MBRU. We also have international students that come, they see what we're doing in the clinic, they do rotations, so it really is quite a plethora of different educational projects that we do here.
Do you know what excites me the most about this is we have young people who consider the industry, the medical industry, and for some reason, it's either I'm going to be a doctor or I'm going to be a nurse. And we're starting to hear more about dentistry. But to hear that you're in the medical industry as, you know, the clinical operations, heading that, and education makes me excited, because it means that industry is now something that we're opening up more of an awareness that you don't have to be a doctor or a nurse to be in medicine. Talk to us about the education part. So for you to be in that role of medical education and training and coordinating with universities of medical practice, what academic background do you have to do this career?
So medicine is really interesting for that, because you can go in at different levels with different qualifications. There's doctors, allied health, and nursing. So my background was very much allied health. So I'm an orthoptist by trade. I know you met Emma, who did a similar initial background to me. But in medicine, absolutely. And I think really now with most careers, it's not you just do one thing and you stay with it. There is lots of ways along your journey that you can pick up different skills. So what I did when I'd only really been qualified maybe 2 years, I knew that I liked educating. I knew I liked working with students, especially ones working in the post-compulsory, so adult learners. So I actually went back to university whilst working. So I studied at UCL in London to gain my PGCE. So I actually became a qualified teacher. Now, you don't always have to do that path. There are other clinical educator courses that you can do. I just like to do things in extremes. So I did a PGCE. I was doing a lot of educational courses and working with the undergraduates in London, at which point I came over here. and then started actually building what we now have in Dubai.
So I can almost hear a lot of teachers watching this going, I never thought that was possible. What made you decide, okay, all right, Katy, I know what we like. Let's go back to uni. Instead of doing a PhD or a master's degree, let's do a PGCE. What made you think that would be the path for you?
So I've always really strongly believed in studying what you enjoy. And I don't know that I ever have really studied anything knowing what that's going to lead to. I've been incredibly lucky. I've worked for an organization that supported me throughout all of my whimsical ideas of what I want to be studying. But I think I can strongly suggest to all students, actually, if you study what you enjoy, it naturally evolves into working in an environment that you hopefully will enjoy. And that's, so I've never really done any of my courses to get to a certain point.
And I love this. Anybody watching, I did not pay Katy to say that. This is something I'm saying to them all the time. Really, really don't worry so much about, the faraway future. Just do something that takes you to that next right step, which sounds what you did as well. So I know that Moorfields Eye Hospital, not only in Dubai, but in London as well, you're known for excellence in medical care. With you being in that role of the head of clinical operations and education, working closely with medical universities, any aspiring medics right now watching this, what kind of tips can you offer them? Forgetting about studying to be a doctor, but more about coming into a hospital like Moorfields and practicing. What have you seen that you think you really want to get this?
So I think one of the things that was definitely missing from what we were kind of taught was actually looking at the whole picture. So looking at things from the patient's perspective. So, when we get students through, we even do simulation on different eye problems so that people can have that bit more of understanding and put themselves in the patient's shoes, because understanding your patient will allow you to give them the best possible care. We also, as I say, understanding how the actual business of a hospital runs, because you also need to know that. We have to not waste things. We have to make sure that we're doing things efficiently, to make sure that it can still run as a business, as a good entity, and effectively and efficiently.
That's interesting. I do talk to students, even if they want to be doctors, and I talk to them about having that business hat on and really thinking about not just what they want to be practicing, but also in the essence of it being part of a business. What do you believe, or what are some of the things that you really want our young doctors to remember, or some tips about the business that they should be aware of?
So the business will always be patient care. That is the absolute crux of it. But without then having the financial stability in your hospital to be able to provide that care, you have to remember that it all just links into together. But the most important thing is the care that you're giving the patient. But yeah, I think a lot of that is missing. It depends, again, if you train in different parts of the world, sometimes if you're in a public healthcare setting, you do forget that everything costs money. Every time you accidentally waste something, some piece of equipment breaks, or you're not careful with it, or something along those lines, all of that costs money, and that in the end can impact on what you can actually end up, how you can treat your patients and the financial stability of the hospital.
And those are things you wouldn't learn in a classroom. You wouldn't learn that studying. You would only learn that when you're on the job. That's a great thing to remind students. I want to talk about your career journey highlights. Some of the things that you mentioned are both exciting and really interesting for any young person considering gaining the experience of work or gaining cultural awareness. So you mentioned charity work and teaching in countries like Ethiopia, China, and Pakistan, and working with students and seeing their exciting journey and the journey of what it can bring. How does that transfer into your current role, and what kind of learning did you gain that you're so appreciative about today?
So I think the key thing that you learn when you go abroad and you see anything is, first of all, if you work in a silo, if you're working within a country that has a wealth of opportunities and quite a lot of money, you think that your ideals are the best ones. You think that the way that you manage things are how things should be done. And the mistake I made when I first started doing a lot of these, that I would take my best practice and I just tried to blueprint it across. I thought that that was what I should do. And the way I taught was very much like, this is the correct way. But you forget that people in different countries are dealing with different the patient, for example, in a different timeline. So therefore we get patients when things are initially starting, whereas in low to middle income countries, often because of transport and the hospitals are too far away, you may get end stage diseases, which are much more difficult to treat. And obviously it doesn't just transfer. So all of our kind of clinical guidelines, clinical governance structures fit our hospitals. But what you have to do when you're going to any other country or going into any other healthcare setting is stop and look and see what they're actually using and see what resources they have and see how they're managing and see how their cultures already work in their hospitals, to then understand a little bit more before you sort of steam in and start telling them what you think is correct. And that was definitely one of the biggest learnings I got. And also understanding that we've got a lot to learn from everyone. That you can take bits of anybody's practice and learn from it. So I'd walk into these heavily overbooked, really busy clinics and understand that some of the ways that they were triaging people, I could take some of that and bring it back to what we can do here.
Amazing. What did you learn about the cultural diversity that comes in handy working in a country like the UAE, where there's so much cultural diversity?
Again, I think it's all about just trying to put yourself in a patient's shoes and in another person's shoes. You may not have the same religion as them, you may not have the same background as them, you may not have the same education as them, but understanding that their fears and their anxieties, we're all human and we all have those anxieties and those fears. So yes, there are other cultural things that we need to consider, but the underlying things that we need to look at are the same across all cultures and across all backgrounds. But as I was saying, just talking to colleagues, having that open conversation with people and trying to actually seek that information and understanding is what I would encourage everybody to do. We're in a really, really positive environment here where there are so many different cultures and it is quite well integrated, but we need to utilize that. We need to be talking about religion. We need to be talking about different cultures, what people do, their traditions, so that we have that deeper understanding of it.
And I think as well, in being a hospital or a clinic that does that, you become known for that as well. And that just brings, it's more than just healthcare. It becomes a really well-connected institute with the people of the community. And I think doctors do much better when their patients feel connected and they see the human behind the title as well. I know being a patient is probably one of the most vulnerable roles to play in our life, isn't it?
Absolutely, I agree.
An amazing experience. What would you say have been your top 3 career tips?
So we've definitely drawn on one, and I would say it's the absolute top one of mine is to just study what you want to do. You know, study what you enjoy. You're never going to enjoy your job every single day, but you will do your job for, 65-70% of your life. So you want to be doing something that you can go into and have enjoyment from, and find that purpose in your life. And by studying things that you enjoy, as I say, it naturally evolves that. I would also just say, just go for things. Just say yes to opportunities that arise. Say if, don't be frightened of an opportunity of going to a different country because you might be on your own for parts of it. Whenever you're feeling uncomfortable, just think to yourself, this is having an adventure. This is what having an adventure feels like.
Amazing. Sorry about the pause.
That's okay.
Thank goodness it's not live. Sometimes I look back at these and I chuckle and I'm like, what are they doing there?
I couldn't remember all three of the things I said then as well. I remembered that main one.
It's really great. Katy, we're coming to the end of our amazing conversation, and I'm listening to you and I see an immensely, incredibly educated woman who has gained so much knowledge, career wisdom. But what's really striking me is the calmness in how you talk about work. And I love that. And I think that young people need to hear more stories like this. What would you say has been your greatest learning challenge? Something that no one ever prepared you for, and you learned the hard way, but you are who you are today because of it.
Oh, I think that was probably moving abroad. I think taking yourself completely out of your comfort zone. I had no idea anything about myself. I'd never really thought about myself until I moved abroad. I didn't really know if I was an introvert or an extrovert. I didn't know much at all. And then moving abroad, you start to realize that, either you need to get that interaction with people, or you don't need it. You're happy being on your own. And I think understanding yourself and therefore understanding your own needs is incredibly important. And I think taking yourself out of your comfort zone is the only way you ever find out about those things about yourself.
I love it. What tips do you have for a young aspiring medic that is struggling to get work experience and really wants to experience what it's like to work in a hospital? So I know it's very tricky, especially in this region, if you're under the age of 18 to get experience. So I actually within a hospital, and that's partly to do with confidentiality issues and being actually within a clinic environment. But my advice would be get in contact with doctors. Doctors like talking about their jobs because the doctors get into these positions because they want to help, and they want to care for people in general. So they're then almost always happy to have conversations about what they do, so that they have a deeper understanding of what the job entails. But from an aspiring medic perspective, I can't think of another job where you get the same sort of job satisfaction. Yes, you have bad days and things don't always go right, but it is one of the most thanked jobs you will ever do. Patients actually do say thank you. Whereas, you work in a lot of other industries and people don't, you don't get thanked for your daily work. So from a satisfaction side of things, it's a great job to go into. Amazing. Thank you so much, Katy. And that brings us to the end of an amazing conversation. Today, we spoke with Katy Naylor, who is the head of clinical operations and education at Moorfields Eye Hospital here in Dubai, which is a branch of Moorfields London. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Katy, for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you all at our next Desk Careers Digital Spotlight. And that's it.